Her hands shook as she tied her apron, hiding the bruises no one could see. Vivian, the manager, mocked her every move in front of the entire restaurant, her words sharp and cutting. "Don't push me. I'm already hurt," Mara whispered, barely audible. Yet the weight of it hung heavy in the bright, indifferent room. And then from a corner a single pair of eyes watched, and everything she thought was lost was about to change. Mara Wells woke before sunrise, the pale morning light slipping through the half-torn curtains of her tiny, cluttered apartment. The smell of stale coffee and leftover bread lingered in the kitchen, a reminder of last night's fatigue. At 25, she carried the weight of responsibility quietly. Her mother had fallen ill months ago, and Mara had become the sole caregiver for her younger sister, Emily. Bills piled up on the counter, and every day was a tightrope walk between exhaustion and necessity. She tied her long brown hair back into a loose ponytail and adjusted her plain blouse and black slacks beneath the apron she wore to work. The bruises along her arms and ribs were faint but still painful, hidden beneath layers of fabric that did little to soothe the ache. Ryan sprawled on the worn couch, empty beer bottles scattered around him, stubble catching the weak morning light. His eyes sharpened as he turned to Mara, voice gruff and accusing. "Where's the money you promised? Don't think I didn't notice the way you were flirting with customers yesterday." Mara said nothing. Her hands trembled slightly as she slipped a few bills into her shoe, the only way to ensure Emily's school fees were covered. Ryan slammed his fist against the wall as she left, the sound echoing like a warning through the apartment. Her stomach clenched, a knot of fear and guilt tightening, but she forced herself to walk out into the world beyond. The bus was crowded, the heat thick, and the city rushing past outside. Mara clutched her shoulder bag close, sleeves rolled down to hide the bruises that still throbbed beneath. She tugged the cuffs tighter, glancing at her phone for Emily's smiling face. It gave her a fleeting spark of courage. A stranger offered her a seat, but she refused politely, used to keeping herself small and invisible. Each jolt of the bus sent shivers of pain through her ribs, yet she straightened as best she could, shoulders set, chin up. Arriving at the Meridian Sky Lounge, the familiar mix of anxiety and resignation settled in her chest. The polished marble floors gleamed beneath bright overhead lights. White tablecloths adorned each table, silver cutlery reflecting the light. Chandeliers hung like frozen fireworks sparkling across the open rooftop space. Mara adjusted her apron once more and took a deep breath. Her legs stiff, her ribs throbbed with every step toward her first station. Vivian Clark appeared, heels clicking like a metronome of authority. Her gaze landed on Mara immediately, sharp and unforgiving. "Wells," she barked. "You're late by 3 minutes. That's 3 minutes too many. Do you even care about this job?" Mara pressed her lips together. "I'm sorry, ma'am," she said quietly, bowing her head slightly. The ache in her chest was nothing compared to the sting of humiliation, as Vivian's eyes scanned her from head to toe, lingering on the faint tremble of her hands and her slightly stiff posture. "Move faster," Vivian snapped. "I don't want to see you dragging yourself around this floor." Mara nodded, forcing herself to walk toward the first table, each step carefully measured against the pain in her bruised ribs. Balancing the tray of drinks, she felt every jolt reverberate through her side. The whispers from fellow staff only added weight to her shoulders, though none dared speak up. Every minor stumble, every flinch seemed magnified beneath Vivian's critical gaze. Ethan Vale sat quietly at a corner table, blending in among the guests. His simple gray shirt and black trousers contrasted with the polished elegance of the restaurant. He observed the staff methodically, but Mara drew his attention almost immediately. He noticed the careful way she balanced her trays, the subtle wince as she moved and the faint bruise peeking beneath her sleeve. He said nothing, letting her dignity remain intact, but his eyes lingered. Mara moved from table to table, carrying plates and drinks with painstaking care. The woman in red, elegant and sharp-eyed, observed her with a smirk, leaning slightly forward as she whispered to her companions. Mara felt the weight of their judgment, but refused to let it show. She adjusted the tray, forcing her body to obey despite the aches and bruises, every careful step a quiet act of defiance. "Wells," Vivian's voice cut across the room sharply again, louder this time. "Don't spill anything. I can't believe how clumsy you are. Do you even know how to serve a table?" Mara's cheeks burned and the familiar pain flared in her ribs. She whispered, "Yes, ma'am," bowing her head. The humiliation was a dull weight pressing down, but she refused to crumble entirely. She moved with precision, each step measured, each tray balanced despite the tremor in her arms. The lunch crowd grew louder, and Mara's legs felt like lead beneath her. Each movement was a challenge. She had to shift her weight, carefully angle her body to minimize the throbbing in her ribs. Vivian hovered constantly, barking orders, snapping at her for every minor delay. Other staff whispered among themselves, some pitying, some curious, all observing Mara's endurance in silence. Ethan's gaze never wavered. He noticed how Mara avoided collisions, offered polite smiles to the guests despite the pain, and held herself with a quiet, dignified poise that was invisible to most. Every flinch, every adjustment of her tray, every faint tremor spoke volumes. He could see the weight of her life outside these walls, the nights she endured abuse, the care she bore for Emily, and the bruises she hid beneath her sleeves. Despite the pain, Mara pressed on. She adjusted trays carefully, her hands shaking, legs stiff, every step jarring against bruised ribs. Vivian barked, criticized, and humiliated, but Mara endured, each motion a testament to her strength. She moved through the polished floors and bright lights, invisible to some, visible to Ethan, who recognized the quiet courage in every step. As Mara straightened to collect more trays, the ache in her ribs flared again. Vivian barked another order, and Mara forced herself to smile, soft and polite. The guests, the trays, the manager's sharp words, they were all part of a world that had tried to diminish her, and yet she moved forward, small but unbroken. The evening crowd at the Meridian Sky Lounge was dense, the clinking of cutlery and low hum of conversation, mixing with the occasional laughter of wealthy patrons. Mara moved carefully between tables, every step a battle against the throbbing ache in her ribs. Each tray felt heavier than the last, her arms quivering slightly as she balanced drinks and plates. Vivian hovered, arms crossed, eyes sharp, scrutinizing her movements with relentless scrutiny. A group of businessmen had just settled at a table near the center. One of them, a tall man with a sharp suit and arrogant eyes, began scrutinizing Mara as she approached. "Is this all you can manage?" He sneered, his voice dripping with contempt. "I've had better service at a fast food joint." Mara's lips pressed together. She had endured so many insults before, from managers, co-workers, and even strangers. But this sting was immediate, sharp, and invasive. I'll get your order," she said softly, forcing a polite smile, keeping her tone calm despite the tremor in her hands. The man leaned forward, jabbing a finger toward her chest. "Do you know who I am?" he demanded, his voice rising. "Maybe if you actually cared about your job, you'd be faster, smarter, better." Mara's chest tightened. Every word felt like another weight pressing on the bruises along her ribs. She stepped back slightly, her body instinctively recoiling. "Please don't push me," she said, voice low but firm. "I'm already hurt." The man's arrogance didn't falter. He shoved her lightly from behind, and Mara stumbled forward, a tray rattling dangerously. The guests nearby shifted uneasily, some whispering, others averting their gaze. Mara's heart raced, and a sharp pain shot through her side as she steadied herself, bracing against the table. From across the room, Ethan's gaze snapped toward the commotion. Calm moments before, he now moved with purpose, rising from his corner table. His long strides crossed the polished marble floors in an instant, and he placed himself between Mara and the man. "That's enough," he said, voice low but authoritative. "Step away from her." The man's eyes widened as he looked up at Ethan. "And who are you?" he demanded, attempting to maintain his bravado. Ethan didn't answer immediately. Instead, he reached for his wallet, revealing his ID. "I am Ethan Vale," he said clearly, his tone carrying weight. "CEO of Vale Industries, and I will not tolerate harassment in my presence or in this restaurant." The room went quiet. Guests exchanged murmurs, the hum of conversation dampened by the sudden authority in Ethan's voice. Vivian's eyes widened, her usual control slipping as she realized the identity of the man standing before her. Mara's breath hitched, the tension in her body easing slightly at Ethan's intervention. The man, realizing he had underestimated the quiet figure in the corner, tried to shrug it off. This is ridiculous. You're being disrespectful and physically aggressive," Ethan said sharply, cutting him off. "The police will be here in moments. I suggest you wait calmly." Vivian opened her mouth to protest, but Ethan's gaze met hers, calm and unyielding. You have failed in your duties as manager. Your behavior toward your staff is unacceptable. Effective immediately, you are dismissed. Vivian's mouth dropped open. She had spent years asserting control through fear. Yet now her authority had evaporated in the presence of someone who carried both power and moral clarity. She turned red with humiliation, her usual arrogance stripped bare. Mara watched quietly, disbelief mixing with relief. The male customer, still trying to maintain composure, found himself faced with the stark reality of consequence. Within minutes, uniformed police arrived, summoned discreetly by Ethan's earlier call. Officers escorted the man away, leaving him visibly shaken as murmurs spread through the restaurant. Mara's knees felt weak, and she sank slightly against the nearest wall. Ethan moved to her side, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. Are you okay? He asked softly, concern threading his voice. Mara nodded, blinking back tears. Yes, I think so, she whispered, the tension in her body slowly ebbing. Thank you. You didn't have to endure that alone, Ethan said quietly. No one should ever make you feel small, weak, or unsafe. Not here, not anywhere. For the first time, Mara felt a sense of protection she hadn't known in years. Her eyes met Ethan's, and she saw a quiet determination there that mirrored her own, a commitment to ensuring she would no longer be silenced or harmed. The restaurant slowly returned to its normal rhythm, though the atmosphere had changed. Guests whispered among themselves, some casting curious glances at Mara, who moved with more confidence now. The tremor in her arms softened by relief and a budding sense of empowerment. Ethan escorted Mara to a quieter corner of the restaurant, away from the bustling crowd. You should rest, he said. Let me handle the details. Mara's hands shook slightly as she adjusted her apron. I can't believe it, she murmured. All this time no one saw or cared. I saw, Ethan said simply, and I will make sure no one ever treats you this way again. You've carried too much for too long. As the police finalized their report, Ethan ensured that Vivian left the premises, escorted discreetly but firmly, her humiliation complete. Mara watched silently, a mixture of relief and astonishment washing over her. The manager who had belittled her, mocked her and ignored her pain was gone, replaced by an environment now guarded by someone who recognized her value and her struggle. The uniformed officers escorted the man out of the Meridian Sky Lounge, his protests muffled by the closing door. Guests whispered, some staring in surprise, others shaking their heads at the sudden turn of events. Mara stood near the wall, her chest still tight from adrenaline and lingering fear. But there was relief too, a sense that finally, justice had stepped in where she could not. Her hands shook slightly as she smoothed her apron, trying to calm the lingering tremor in her arms and ribs. Ethan moved toward her with steady steps, placing a hand lightly on her shoulder. You don't have to be afraid anymore, he said, voice calm but carrying authority. Not here, not anywhere. Mara's throat tightened. For months, fear had been her constant companion, not just from her home life, but from the world around her. She let out a shaky breath. I can't believe this is happening, she whispered. I've endured so much. At home, too. Ethan's gaze softened. I want you to tell me. Whatever you need to say, I'll listen. The words she had kept locked inside for years tumbled out. She spoke of Ryan, her boyfriend, the nights he shouted, the hands that hit, the bruises she hid under sleeves, the money she stole just to pay for Emily's school fees. She spoke of sleepless nights, of hiding tears behind smiles, of the quiet desperation that had followed her from home to work every day. Mara's voice wavered, but she continued, each word a small act of defiance, a claim of her own truth. If this story touched your heart, don't let it fade here. Sometimes the quietest strength carries the heaviest weight. Share it. Someone out there might need this reminder of courage. Comment your thoughts, tell us how Mara's journey moved you. Like the video if her resilience inspired you in any way. Subscribe for more stories that reveal the power of human endurance. Life can break us, but it can also teach us to rise stronger. Every struggle has a story waiting to be told, just like Mara's. Watch, share, and let these moments of courage ripple outward. Because courage once seen can change the world, even quietly. Ethan remained silent, letting her speak, validating the pain she had carried alone for so long. When her voice faltered and she fell silent, Exhausted by the weight of her confession, he placed both hands gently on her shoulders. "You're not alone anymore," he said. "I'll make sure Ryan can't hurt you again. You and Emily will be safe." Tears spilled freely from Mara's eyes. "But Emily, I can't leave her alone," she whispered, her voice tight with fear and lingering guilt. Ethan smiled gently. "You don't have to. I will take care of her. I'll make sure she goes to school, has meals, and is safe every day. You won't have to bear this weight alone anymore." The burden Mara hadn't realized she'd been carrying began to lift. The bruises, the pain, the humiliation. They had been chains, but now they felt like markers of her endurance, proof that she had survived. For the first time in years, she felt a faint glimmer of hope that life could be different. That safety and care were not just dreams, but realities she could step into. In the following days, Mara began to see the change unfold. The restaurant, once a place where she had been constantly belittled by Vivian Clark, now felt different. The staff moved more freely, the tension less suffocating. Mara's steps were more deliberate, her posture straighter, her hands steadier as she carried trays. She no longer flinched at criticism. She no longer whispered apologies for her mere presence. She had endured, survived, and now she was seen. Ethan remained a constant support, ensuring Emily's school routine was steady, their home safe, and their mother's care attended to. Small acts of kindness, groceries delivered, meals prepared, schedules organized, began to fill the cracks Mara had long held together herself. She began to lean on him not out of dependence, but from the quiet reassurance that someone was actively protecting the life she had struggled so hard to maintain. At work, Mara moved differently. Her quiet strength radiated through each careful gesture, each polite greeting to guests, each confident step across the polished floors. The whispers that had once followed her were replaced by a sense of admiration and curiosity. She was no longer the timid, bruised girl who had feared every sharp word and every glance. She carried herself with dignity earned through endurance, her pain now transformed into resilience. One evening, as Mara carried a tray through the dining area, she caught Ethan's eyes from across the room. He nodded subtly, a gesture of acknowledgement and support. Mara allowed herself a small, grateful smile. This silent communication, the presence of someone who understood and protected her, was a luxury she had never known. At home, Mara watched Emily do her homework quietly at the kitchen table. The laughter and chatter of the girl filled the apartment in a way that had been absent for too long. Mara tucked Emily into bed later that night, brushing back her hair with care. "You're safe now," she whispered, feeling the words both for Emily and herself. She had survived long enough to know what safety felt like, and now she had it for both of them. Ethan's careful support extended beyond simple safety. He made sure Emily's school supplies were ready, her meals consistent, and her world secure. He handled practicalities Mara had struggled to maintain alone, allowing her to focus on rebuilding herself. Slowly, she found herself engaging with life again, shopping, cooking, reading in the evenings, and even laughing when Emily's jokes caught her off guard. Weeks passed, and Mara began to feel the transformation fully. The apartment was a place of warmth instead of fear, filled with small moments of normalcy and peace. At work, she no longer moved through the restaurant with the tense caution of someone expecting scorn at every corner. She had earned the right to move confidently with poise and dignity. One evening, she paused by the large windows of the apartment, gazing at the city lights glittering below. She thought of everything she had endured, the humiliation at work, the fear and abuse at home, the bruises she had carried quietly. And yet she was no longer broken. She had survived, and now she had allies, protection, and a chance to shape her own future. Ethan joined her silently, standing at her side. Mara didn't speak. She didn't need to. He understood her silence, the depth of relief and cautious hope that shimmered beneath her calm exterior. Together they watched the city, the possibilities stretching out before them. Mara felt a rare sense of safety, hope, and determination. She had endured darkness and emerged into light. Mara knew challenges would still come. Life was never simple, and there were still responsibilities. Emily's schooling, her mother's care, and rebuilding the threads of a life long frayed by fear and abuse. But she faced them differently now. She had support, she had safety, and she had strength born from years of surviving what few could imagine. The restaurant continued to hum with life, but Mara moved through it with a new awareness. She was no longer the timid, bruised girl who flinched at authority or insult. She was a woman who had endured abuse, humiliation, and fear, and emerged stronger, resilient, and finally free. Every tray she carried, every step she took reflected that quiet strength. At home, Emily slept peacefully, Mara tucked beside her. Ethan ensured that every detail of their lives, from meals to school to safety, was cared for, giving Mara the freedom to heal. For the first time, she allowed herself to imagine a life not dominated by fear or survival, but by possibility, care, and the quiet satisfaction of safety and love. The city lights outside shimmered like stars, reflecting the new possibilities before Mara. She had faced humiliation, abuse, and despair, and now she was stronger, protected, and ready to shape her future on her own terms. For the first time, Mara Wells felt truly free.